more libido. So for instance, one time I was doing a rotation at Tulane Medical Center, an endocrinology, and we saw a lot of these disorders. It was a tertiary referral center. And a lady brought in her eight-year-old boy who was already beginning to shave. Now, he also had adult-sized genitalia and a strong libido. So you can imagine that this created a little bit of a problem. I remember seeing a couple of women with adrenal glandular syndrome. And of course, they would have the same problem. They would develop a male pattern of hair distribution. And the other problem, one of them had fairly impressive clitomegaly. So, you know, sometimes I'll get sick. You know, sometimes I feel like a cold coming on. I'll typically do things on my own. I'll get something over the counter, or I'll take some antibiotics I have at home, but I'll wait a while. I'll see if it runs its course, if it doesn't go away on its own. I may wait a month or two, and if it doesn't go away then, maybe I'll think about going to the doctor. But if you're a female who develops a penis, you go in right away. You don't even wait on that. And that's kind of what happens. I mean, you can imagine. You gotta wait. Some things you wait on, some things you don't. So, we said that the response to stress is going to be the release of ACTH. Actually, it begins with corticotropin release hormone, which causes anterior pituitary release of ACTH, and then that stimulates the adrenal cortex, producing mineralocorticoids and glucocorticoids. You know what these things do. Okay, so you hold on to salt water, your blood pressure goes up a little bit, your sugar increases, your immune system gets suppressed to some extent. Okay. Proteins are broken down, fat is broken down. Some of those proteins and fat get converted to glucose or used for energy. Now, that's kind of the long-term response to stress. The immediate response is a response not of the adrenal cortex, but a response of the adrenal medulla. For instance, in the setting of acute stress, you have autonomic sympathetic impulses, preganglionic sympathetic impulses that travel down to the adrenal medulla and trigger release of epinephrine and norepinephrine. The class of hormones that epinephrine and norepinephrine belong to are called catecholamines. Catecholamines. It's like a benzene group, benzene ring. It's got like somewhere along the line, it's got an OH. And then, so this is a catecholamine. And then there's some type of amine group. That means it's a nitrogen-containing group. That's the term catecholamine. But epinephrine and norepinephrine are closely related. They bind to the same receptors. So they both bind to adrenergic receptors. When the adrenal medulla releases these catecholamines, it's usually in a ratio of 80% epinephrine, about 20% norepinephrine. And the activity of these hormones are all the activities that you associate with the fight or flight response. So, with respect to the pupils, when these hormones bind to adrenergic receptors along the radial smooth muscle of the iris, your pupil dilates. When these hormones bind to beta-1 receptors, beta-1 adrenergic receptors of the heart, your heart rate increases and force of contraction increases. So your cardiac output increases. Blood flow to muscles increases. Blood pressure increases. When these hormones act upon beta-2 adrenergic receptors in the airways, you undergo bronchodilation, which improves ventilation. So that you can provide oxygen to the muscles that are going to be involved in fight or flight. Your metabolic rate increases. You have beta receptors in the liver that cause the breakdown of glycogen into its glucose subunits that are released into the bloodstream. So you provide fuel, okay, to provide energy for the fight or flight. The old name for epinephrine, by the way, is adrenaline. The old name for norepinephrine was noradrenaline. And so when you're subject to acute stress, when you're suddenly surprised, someone pops out from behind the bushes with a gun, you feel that surge of adrenaline. You feel your heart start to race. You feel that anxiety, that tremor. That's adrenaline. Okay. Now, I want to go back and mention a couple of the hormones that we didn't talk about yet. I mentioned that the parafollicular cells of the thyroid, called the C cells, they produce calcitonin. And I mentioned, I think, that calcitonin in some way regulates serum calcium levels. On the other hand, if you look at the thyroid gland, okay, from the anterior surface, all you can see is thyroid tissue. If you were to turn the thyroid around and look at it from its posterior aspect, you would see 4 little glands embedded within. These 4 little glands are called parathyroid glands. And parathyroid glands produce a different hormone called PTH, which stands for parathyroid hormone. I bring up parathyroid hormone, at the same time I'm bringing up calcitonin, because these are counter-regulatory hormones. They're both involved in serum calcium levels, but they do opposite things. For example, the stimulus for the release of PTH from parathyroid glands is hypocalcemia. If blood levels of calcium are low, the parathyroid gland produces PTH. PTH is released into the bloodstream and it targets certain tissues. For instance, it targets the kidneys. And one of the things it does is it activates vitamin D3. We talked about vitamin D last time.
Yeah.
In the kidneys. So in order to become fully activated, that cholecalciferol has to undergo a second hydroxylation. It has to become 1,25-dihydroxy cholecalciferol, or 1,25-dihydroxy D3. So that final hydroxylation is facilitated by PTH. But PTH also does something else within the kidneys. It triggers increased reabsorption of calcium. In exchange for secretion of phosphate. So, one mechanism, a second. Both of these serve to elevate calcium levels because that activated form of vitamin D is going to enhance absorption of calcium from our diet. In fact, that's why they fortify milk and dairy products with vitamin D, so you can make use of the calcium that's present within. So these two are both going to serve to increase calcium. PTH also targets bone. And what it does in bone is it increases osteoclastic activity. You know, bone, there's a balance between osteoblastic activity, which is building bone, and osteoclastic activity, which is breaking bone down. Bone is constantly undergoing breakdown and reformation. It's not a static tissue as you might think by just looking at a bone. And so under the influence of PTH, you increase osteoblastic activity, and so when you break down bone, you release calcium into the bloodstream. So, in fact, we think of bone as our warehouse for calcium. That's where it's stored. You know, calcium is used for a lot of things. I think everyone's familiar with the fact that calcium is necessary for muscle contraction. It plays a role in formation of action potentials, particularly in cardiac muscle. Calcium is needed for almost every step, not every step, but almost every step in the coagulation cascade. So sometimes if you collect blood and you don't want it to clot, you'll put an agent in the vacutainer tube that binds the calcium. Because if you remove the calcium from the serum, then that blood won't clot. So calcium is used for a lot of processes within the body. Now, we said that calcitonin is the counter-regulatory hormone. It's the yin to the yang. Whereas hypocalcemia stimulates release of PTH. High calcium levels, hypercalcemia, stimulates release of calcitonin. Calcitonin is the opposite. It's going to also target bone. But in this case, it increases osteoblastic activity. In other words, it increases the activity of osteoblasts that take the calcium from the bloodstream and embed it into the new bone that's being formed. Sometimes you will do a serum chemistry profile. And that serum chemistry profile may include 12 or more tests. It will typically include your electrolytes, your renal function, your liver function test. It will include albumin, calcium, and phosphate. Now, normal calcium levels may be up to, let's say, 11.0. If you have somebody with a persistently elevated calcium level, let's say it's 11.8 or 12.0, chances are better than not, and everything else is normal, by the way. There's no other abnormalities you can detect either by physical exam, by laboratory studies, or X-ray. Chances are better than not that that person has a parathyroid adenoma, a tumor of cells that are producing PTH. And in fact, that's raising the calcium level. I think I mentioned the fact that in my neighborhood, if you wake up early, like if I had to get here early, and I wake up early, there'll be a pack of women who are circulating who are walking the neighborhood, and they do what I call power walking. They have these weights on their ankles, and they have these dumbbells in their hands, and they're walking like this. And there'll be, when I say a pack, there'll be like 10 of them, okay? And almost to the point where they're blocking the street, okay? And if you blow the horn a little bit, they get upset at you.
You said okay?
These are postmenopausal women. Okay. Why do you think it is that they're doing all this?
Strengthen bone.
Right, because tension on bone stimulates osteoblastic activity. It promotes bone growth. Okay, and generally what happens is postmenopausal, you have a lack of estrogen, and so a lack of estrogen is correlated with osteoporosis for the trauma to a bone. Now, one drug that you can take to counter osteoporosis is called miacalcin. That's the brand name, miacalcin. And it's a nasal spray. And basically, what it's made up of is salmon calcitonin. So by taking this nasal spray that's readily absorbed across the nasal mucosa into the bloodstream, they are stimulating osteoblastic activity. So I just want to make an announcement, a brief announcement. JJ is now working at nothing but cakes. And so if you want a free cake or two, you can stop. It's near Severn, I guess, near, what is it, near, it's on Vets.
Yeah, it's on Vets near Lakeside.
Right. And the cakes are good.
You can sign up for the e-club, you'll get a free bunch every birthday.
Or if she's simply there behind the counter and no one else is there.
We got free samples every day. Every day.
Where is it? By Lakeside? That's where it's gonna work. Where is it?
Hook you up with 3. That depends on the teachers. You get a whole big bun cake or something? Well, a fondant. A fondant is about this big, but it'll fill you up. It's big enough.
All right. Now, we talked about counter-regulatory hormones. Pancreas. Remember pancreas? We talked about that.
Look at old pancreas.
You know, we said that the calcium's both, the pancreas is both an exocrine and an endocrine organ. The endocrine cells are contained within these islets of Langerhans. We talked about these before. We said that the alpha cells produce glucagon. And the beta cells produce